Welcome back to the Xav Builds Podcast. I'm Xavier Duffy, and today I'm joined by Mark Parton, MLA for Brindabella, Shadow Minister for Housing and Homelessness, and the most active politician in the ACT, full stop. At the last election, Mark pulled the highest number of first preference votes across the entire territory. Why? Because people actually know who he is, and more importantly, he listens, he shows up, and he gets things done. We're digging into what politicians actually do, why construction is deeply political, whether we like it or not, and how decisions at the top affect the everyday job site in the territory. Mark, welcome. Good to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's a great setup you got here, and I love what you're doing in this space, mate. It's really good.
Tell me about your journey. You were a radio host for a while.
Yeah, for 33 years, which is a long time.
Yeah.
So I started on the radio when I was 16.
Really?
Yeah. And, bounced around the country. I worked in every state and territory except Queensland and the Northern Territory.
Yeah.
And I ended up here in the ACT back in 99. I was going to be here for 6 months because I came here because I got squeezed out of Newcastle and there was nothing else really going. And they said, there's this thing in Canberra. And I said, Canberra? Really? So obviously I haven't left. So I did radio here from 99 to 2015. And in the last 8 years, I was on the talk station. I was on 2CC. And so it just involved a lot more interaction with people than my days at Mix 106.3. And it involved getting a lot more feedback about shit that was going wrong. And, it sort of, even then in radio host days, there were some positive outcomes that we could get for people when they contacted us with things that weren't quite working. But it really inspired me to say, I'd like to have a go at actually representing these people. And so, I ended up running for the Liberals in 2016 and won a seat then. And that's where I've been since then.
Fantastic. I was just saying before we jumped on here that I've got a newfound respect for the radio hosts and the people that talk, because it is difficult. You listen back to yourself and you think, I shouldn't have said that, or I should have said this in this way. The yeps in some of my earlier videos, I was like, why am I saying that?
I do know what you mean. And I mean, obviously this is radio with pictures, what we're doing now, but I always found the beauty of radio was that it was instantly published. That if you're sitting on the radio and you're doing an interview, or it's instant, you don't have to go through an editor, you don't have to there's no post-production, bang, it's just out there.
Yeah, and that's cool to me because there's no looking back.
Yep.
Then
That's right.
We're just looking forward. I don't have time to go back and look at it.
No.
Whereas
No safety net.
I love
Good.
Hey mate, you've got such a good voice. No wonder you're on radio for so many years. Did that develop as you were going?
Because it's funny. When I go back and sit in a room now with my brother and my mother, and I listen to them talk, and I think, wow, I used to talk like this. because like I grew up out in the sticks in Western Australia, in this sort of central wheat belt farming town, and people, like, I can remember in my very early days in radio in Perth that the production manager, the guy who recorded all the commercials, he got me in one day to do some voiceovers on some ads. And then he had me come back in a week later. And this is a long time ago. This is like 1984. And he had handwritten this document, which was titled, Why Mark Parton Sounds Like Shit. And he listed all of the sounds that I make and what I should make. And he said, look, I can't use you on any ads because you sound like shit. And he sent me away and he got me to pick a couple of distant mentors, not that I would meet them, but he said, listen to those guys. And when you're not listening to them, he said, when you're driving along in your car, like, read the road signs, read them out aloud and have a listen to how you're sounding. And, he was extremely pivotal in that sort of transition to, because he said to me, and this was the pivotal thing, he said, we're not going to have to just change the way that you present on the radio. He said, we're going to have to change the way that you speak. And that's what he did.
He did.
Yeah.
He did a good job too.
Yeah. Works.
Now, 33 years in radio, and then you decide to go into politics. What was that first election like? And what was that, what was the...
Well, it's interesting. I gave the radio away in December of 2015 because I'd been running a digital marketing business as well as doing breakfast radio. And it was hard yards because I was, my alarm would go at 2:45 every morning, and you'd go in and do the radio. And then once you were done with all that stuff at about 11, well, then I'd go to my day job. And, I'd rattle away at that till 6 o'clock at night. And it was just killing me. And I made this promise to myself that the month that I earned more money from the business than I did from the radio, I'd give the radio away. And I was true to myself. So I resigned in December of 2015. And so at the time that I was tapped on the shoulder by the libs to say, hey, is there any chance you can fill this spot for us? I'd been out of radio for 6 months and running my own business. And so I I only had 10 months of running my own business that was my only earning. But even out of that time, I just take my hat off to anybody like you, to a bunch of people that are watching this program who their income comes absolutely from business that they generate. And if they don't generate business, they don't pay the wages, they don't eat, because I don't know, there's too many people in politics who've never done that. That it doesn't matter what happens, they always get paid. And you know what it's like. You remember the early days of this business where you're sitting down trying to do the sums and work out how you're going to pay for shit and thinking this is, it's hard.
It was a slog. It was a real slog. But what I will say to that is when I first met you, I instantly found you understood where I was coming from. And my take on why you've been so successful is that you come with an understanding straight away. And you do that by asking questions, finding out what my challenges and my problems are, and then looking to help me with that. And I think that's why so many people voted for you. And I think that's why you're such a prominent figure within the AC or the Legislative Assembly.
I try, mate. I try. And I'm driven by this morbid concept that we're not here on the earth for very long. We're all going to die, like really soon, Xav.
Yes.
In the context of the time on the planet, our time here is so short. And so you may as well make a splash every day. And you may as well make people smile, and you may as well assist people in whatever way you can, because you're not here for very long.
So what else do you think sets you apart, Mark?
I don't know. I don't think that what I do is all that scientific. We just go hard. We just go hard, and to some extent, when you set up the systems that we've set up, much of it on social media, but also just on the way that we engage in the community, it feeds itself, in that my office gets contacted by so many more people who want assistance because they've seen me giving assistance to other people. And so we end up with, we always bite off more than we can chew. My staff hate me because, we'll think that the week's chock-a-block and there's too much to do. And then I'll say, guys, here's another thing I've got. I got this. And, you just do your best. And, understand that although I've been in politics for 9 years, I've never been in government, and so I'd love to be in government. And I'm assuming that the sort of frameworks and the systems that I've set up now would also function well in government. I hope I get to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, from what you're saying, it's almost like you're running your own little business in there.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's very similar. And I mean, the Hare Clark system of politics here is interesting too, because it's to some extent, particularly when you get to an election time, it's a bit of Hunger Games goes on, because there's 5 Liberal candidates in my seat. There's a Robson rotation on the ballot paper, so no candidate is favoured. And so electorally, your biggest enemies are actually your own. They're actually your own people. Because, if you finish in the top 2 in your electorate in terms of the top 2 from the Liberals, well, you're going to get elected. And the people who are more likely to take a vote from you are your own people.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I love politics. I love knowing about it, but I don't know the first thing about it. What I'm trying to get at is it's very steeped in tradition. And one of the topics I really want to talk about is the tradition of politics, because I think tradition's really cool. And you put up a video on, I think it was Instagram or Facebook about the mace.
Yep.
Now I want to talk about this mace. I didn't know that. No. I didn't know that. Can you explain it to people
It's sort of difficult to explain without a visual. There's this big bloody brown stick with sort of gold-plated bits on the end of it. It's quite heavy. It's really, really heavy. And it lives in a little glass cabinet just outside the assembly chamber, but it's ceremonial. It's tradition that at the start of the sitting, the clerk will walk in with the mace and announce that the speaker is coming, and then the mace sits in front of the speaker's chair, and that's signals that it's all commenced and it's all started. And it is extremely ceremonial. And, you know, one of the things, I mean, I've been the speaker for 6 months, and lots of it is really weird, mate. because it's like, even just the fact that, you know, when I'm walking through the building, all these people say, "Mr. Speaker," and I'm thinking, yeah, hello, because that's what they call me, because that's what they sort of have to call me. And even just the whole, like, when people walk into the chamber, if we're in the middle of a sitting and someone walks in past the public gallery, when they walk in, they bow to the speaker, and it's like, what?
And this is the tradition I'm talking about. Like that's been going on forever.
Yeah.
And I think that those little things are cool. But do you think that they sometimes get in the way of?
Oh, look, I don't know. I mean, there was a stoush, you know, that I was sort of, I shouldn't bring it up again because I was disappointed that it got any airtime. There was a stoush that myself and Tom Emerson, the new independent member, had at the start of the term, because Tom made the call that he wasn't going to wear a tie in the chamber because he doesn't wear ties. And, you know, I just made the point that ultimately the speaker has the call to say you can participate in debate or you can't. And I was going to let him participate in debate, but I didn't want to be the speaker that presided over a term whereby the dress code went through the floor, because I don't know, you know, I mean, obviously he dresses smartly. He wears, you know, a shirt and a jacket.
But no Adidas tracksuits, right?
No, you see, but this is the thing.
This is the thing.
We shouldn't arrive at that situation. And indeed, there was a guy who won a seat in the Tasmanian Parliament. I can't think of his name. He's an independent. He's a fisherman. And he, for most of his working life, didn't wear shoes. So I'm told, I met him because I was in the Tassie Parliament 4 months or so ago. And like people... Yeah, when he first rocked up, apparently he looked like a homeless man. Going into he's smartened his attire at this stage. I mean, the clothing doesn't really matter,
but it's a respect thing. I look at it as a respect thing.
Yeah, and that's how I look at it too. In terms of, you know, if you're going to a funeral or you're going to a court case or you're going to whatever, you're not actually wearing the tie for you. You're wearing it for these other people. And you know, we've had that discussion, and he's not wearing a tie and whatever. I don't care.
Yeah, but politics is a little bit of theatre. It's a little bit of theatrics, and I think that, yeah, let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yep.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, just because there's rules of engagement that have been set up, and those rules continually change. You know, like as the speaker, I'm the chair of the Admin and Procedure Committee, and I can tell you, I think I'm able to tell you, maybe I'm not. The Admin and Procedure Committee in every term is always examining how we can adjust the standing orders to actually reflect the 21st century.
Yeah, I think that they need to do that to keep it relevant.
Yeah.
People want to look at something and see and understand what's going on in there. I think it's cool that you can't say you're wrong. You have to say, I respectfully disagree. Is that right?
No, you can say you're wrong.
You can say you're wrong?
Yeah, no, that's not unparliamentary.
You have to say, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, well, they do.
They do?
Yeah, no, they tend to do that. Fiona's funny. I shouldn't say this because I sound like Fiona Carrick. She's, if you're watching Fiona, I'm sorry. When she's speaking, of course, she's one of the new independents. It doesn't matter to her If there is a male person sitting in the speaker's chair, she just goes with Mr. Speaker. And if there is a female person sitting in the speaker's chair, she goes with Madam Speaker. Now, the actual titles are Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Assistant Speaker. But no, she doesn't care. She just, if she looks up and there's a bloke there, she just goes with Mr. Speaker.
Right.
And that's fine. That's
fine.
Yeah.
Well, I think my take on the theatrics and the theatre of it is to keep it interesting, because I feel like if you come in an environment where you've got these big egos, you want to be, heard and listened to, and if you add a little bit of theatrics into it, then people are more likely to go, oh, that's right, he was saying it like this, and he was cranky, I felt, or he was really overinflating it.
Look, I know some people get frustrated with all the rules and regulations about debate, but I think you've got to consider it. You've got to consider it like a game of football, whatever your code of choice is, whether it's league or union or soccer or AFL. If you just removed all of the rules, and let's say with rugby union, you just remove all the rules, you just get 13 blokes each side.
15 for rugby,
15. Sorry, 15
rugby union,
for
rugby leagues 13,
and the only rule was you've got to get that ball through those blokes to the other side. It'd be crazy because if you could just punch anyone, if you could just if you could do anything, it'd be ridiculous. And so you have to have rules in place so that there's a fairness about how you participate, and so that people don't get hurt. And so that's why the rules are in place.
I agree. And I, as I mentioned at the start, I like the tradition. I think it's cool. I think it does show respect. It shows respect for the positions that you all hold, and that you respect the Canberra people. So I think the traditions are important. In terms of time members and not wearing a tie on, I don't really care about that. Do whatever you want, mate. As long as you speak well and you take it seriously, which he definitely is. I don't have a problem with it. But it is cool the theatrics around, doesn't wear a tie. You had to check him. He set you up almost.
Well, don't worry. I had conversations with the two previous speakers who indicated that they probably would not have let him participate.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay.
So mine was a non-ruling. I didn't give a ruling on it.
Right.
I just said, gives me a bit of grief.
Right. I want to move past that now. I want to ask you.
So do I. Jeez.
What does it look like when the government is working well, Mark?
Look, I think by and large, and I reckon you'll agree with this, what it should look like, it should look like the same way that it looks like when an umpire in a football game is working well. You don't even realize that they're there. The game just plays. And that's how it should work. Now that's I'm a Liberal member, and so of course I'm going to say that, because my party is about smaller government. My party is about allowing people to do what they want to do, and giving them the freedom to do that. And so that's what I think it looks like when government's working well.
I agree. I think you don't realise the government's there when it's working well.
Yeah,
I feel like in the background it just, works to your advantage almost, and you're being served, you're being listened to, and away you go.
Yeah.
I think if the government was working well, I wouldn't have met you.
Oh, no, probably not. No, absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And, I got to say, I was blown away by the work that you did and the way that this industry pulled together to support that call to make things work better. I thought that exercise that you went through earlier, was that
earlier this year? Yeah.
Was extraordinary. And, it's obviously moved the dial in some of the discussions, but I don't think it's moved it sufficiently.
Well, I've mentioned this before. I did have a catch up with Chris Steele, and he thanked me for bringing it to the top of the priorities, and was open and wanted to have a good and honest discussion about it. So I did appreciate that. But you're right. Like since sort of doing the petition, and I haven't heard much more.
No.
I don't know how much has moved. I know that the government has brought in some new stuff, and they're looking at the missing middle, and there's every other acronym under the sun that's going on. So look, I mean, at least I've touched the dial a little bit.
Yeah.
What does it look like when government isn't working well? Well, I think we know the answer to that too, right?
They're just getting in your way. They're getting in your way. And obviously, I mean, mate, there's always this continual struggle that there's only so much money. And there's only, particularly in this jurisdiction, there's only so many ways to make money. And so there's a long list of things that government would like to do. They can't do them all because they don't have enough money. And so it gets down to priorities of what is it that we're going to spend these limited resources on. And, my party and opposition argues that often they prioritize the wrong things.
Mm.
There's all this talk that the assembly is completely different now because of the independents. And this is what I would point out. There's 25 members in this chamber. To win a vote, you need a majority. So you need 13 members. Labor has 10 members. All right. So they obviously can't win a vote on their own. We've got 9. The Greens have 4, and there are 2 independents. Labor's 10 and 2 independents does not make 13. So the only way Labor can win a vote is to sidle up with the Greens and get 14, or sidle up with us and get 19. So the independents are legislatively irrelevant. They're making a lot of noise, but it doesn't really matter because they're legislatively irrelevant. It's a really interesting term, though, because, of course, there isn't a steadfast power sharing agreement between Labor and the Greens. And so you don't know how things are going to play. And the government finds themselves, the government being Labor, heavily compromised because they can't get everything up that they want to get up.
And that's the battleground.
It is.
That's the give and take and compromise.
And it'll get batshit crazy before the end of the term, because it always does. It always gets a bit rabid in the last 18 months because as you're leading up to an election, each party will want to flex their political muscles. And it'll mean that there'll be some things that in this early part of the term would get passed that won't at the back end because it'll just get, I'd hate to be the speaker. Oh no, that's me.
yeah, that is you.
Yeah.
and the Liberals vote all together so that you don't just get one. That would be...
The only time that we don't is when we declare that it's an issue of conscience, like voluntary assisted dying or euthanasia or same-sex marriage or stuff like that. So we declare that there are some things that are matters of conscience and we're free to vote however we want to vote.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. Why do you think construction is such a always a political hot topic?
It is, isn't it? I think a lot of it's based on the fact that, and I continually make this point to my party, to other people, if when you wanted to build something, you had to consult a committee of 450,000 people and get unanimous support to build that thing, you would never build anything. Because you would never, ever get unanimous support from everybody about what you should build, how you should build. And so you end up with this struggle where there'll be sections of any community, whether it be one person, 10 people, or 300 people, that don't want something getting built. And this value judgment has to be made as to whether their opinions outweigh the rest of the community. And at a time when housing is at such a premium, at a time when the construction industry nationally is not able to actually fulfill the required number of builds, when you put all these other things in place to slow it down, it's just the recipe for disaster. People, by and large, want their suburbs to stay exactly the way that they are now. And, it's a choice that cross-party or cross-bench parties and oppositions and government parties have to make all the time as to who do we support here? Who do we support here? Because there's this bunch of residents here who might vote for us and they want to stop building this. Do we back them or do we, how do you look at the big picture and make a decision? It's hard.
Sorry, a few technical difficulties. We're still learning here. We're still learning. But yeah, I was talking about Tasmania and how Tasmania are, they're talking about building a stadium there, and by all accounts, they don't want the stadium. But
I don't know. I mean, whatever decision you make will be a good one, and whatever decision you make will also be a bad one.
Yeah.
In terms of classic example, I know it's much smaller than a stadium. I do a lot of door knocking. You're door knocking in Waniassa and there's a bunch of people, maybe there's 3 people who say, there's hoons that speed down this road all the time and we really want some speed bumps. if you letterbox that whole area to say who wants speed bumps there and there, half of the suburb will vehemently say yes, and half of them will vehemently say no. It'll be 50-50 split, mate. And so, it's often the same. We campaigned in the 24 election to build a stadium in the ACT, and it was received quite well, but there was a bunch of people who didn't want us to do it. Whatever decision you make will be good for a bunch of people and bad for a bunch of other people. And it's just about finding something that's least bad.
Yeah, or another idea is communicate to the people that don't think it's a bad idea why it's a good idea.
Yeah, but some people, you're not going to convince them. Dare I say it, that ongoing, I get sick to death of turning on the radio now, and there'll always be someone in the comments who'll say, oh, the government be able to do that if they weren't building the tram, and that argument will just go on. And now we sowed the seeds of that argument. We got it going and we fanned the flames. But I don't know, it's sometimes there are arguments that'll never, ever end, aren't they?
They are. Yeah. And look, the tram, that's a hot topic.
Well, yeah, I think it's past a point of no return, really.
It is, yeah.
When I say that, I don't, my party, hasn't come out with an official position this time around, but there comes a point where there's not much you can do. The business case was interesting. The numbers, have you seen the numbers on the business case or not? There's no, it's 2019 that was made, and it's now 2025, but there's no way on God's earth that they're anywhere near the figures. Because I think they're talking about 1.5 billion to get from Commonwealth Park to Woden. No.
Parliament House is in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen there?
It's going to be at least 3 times as much as that. At least.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah.
This is the thing of politics, though. And people have to get involved, and people have to understand why it is important. I feel like in construction, we just want to get on with the job.
Of course.
We don't want to listen to the outside noise. We just want to do our job. And that is great. But I think a part of that is we have to have our eyes up and be thinking and listening to, politicians like yourselves and seeing what we can do to put our voice forward and say, no, I don't like that actually, or I am for that. And I think in construction, and what I want to do out of this conversation really is highlight the importance of holding our government accountable, and making sure that people understand is if we get in a big enough group and we make some noise, they have to listen, and hopefully they can change things to suit us a bit better.
Yeah, you'd think so. Obviously there were some big planning changes announced this week by the planning minister. Now, I would point out that as the speaker, I no longer hold any portfolio responsibilities.
Yeah.
And so, it's not for me to make public comment on.
Yeah, so they've taken you back from that, have they?
Oh well,
and that's just part of it.
Yeah, if you're the speaker, you can't hold portfolios. You can't, because as the speaker, I can't run a motion, I can't run a bill, I can't do that stuff.
So do you have to sort of be independent on the fence? But
you certainly got to be independent when you're in the chair. But because we're such a small parliament, there's an acceptance that there will be moments where I revert to. I've got 2 seats in that chamber. I've got the speaker's chair, but I've also got a seat down on the floor, because I will participate often in local Tuggeranong debates, but in some others too. And there's an acceptance that as the speaker here, you can do it. You certainly couldn't do it on the Hill. Like Milton Dick would not be tramping down to the floor and participating in some debate on some motion. He wouldn't be doing it. But they've got 150 members. We've only got 25.
Yeah. So you still got a voice there, and you can.
I have.
Yeah.
And the changes to the planning system. Yeah. Look, there's been some flaws and some pros and cons that have been flagged. I was fascinated to read an article this morning in the Canberra Times that quoted, and I can't remember the name of the guy or the company, who basically said, we don't do any work in Canberra anymore. We're done here. We just do the South Coast, because the least variation charge and this charge and that regulation, it just means we just can't make enough money here. And so we don't do it. And he was dubious as to whether these changes would lure them back, because it is about money. It's you're not in business just to make people feel good. you're in business to make money, and so you should be. I get sick to death of these progressive types who get down on anyone who's trying to make money. That's how the world works. Like, unless you're making money, you wouldn't employ all these people. You wouldn't be building all this stuff. I don't want to defend, for argument's sake, I'm going to go right off track here. I don't want to defend Bunnings, but you saw the Four Corners expose on Bunnings, and it's like, yeah, it looks as though there's some anti-competitive stuff going on and whatever, but ultimately, you shouldn't be blaming Bunnings. They've operated within the framework, and they had a charter to make as much money as they could, and that's what they're doing. That's
right.
what they're doing.
Right.
So it's like, sure, have a look at what's gone on and where we've ended up, and maybe try to change the framework to stop that from happening. But if that's the framework and those are the rules, well, then that's what people are going to do.
That's right.
Yeah,
it's a free country.
That's right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you. Yeah, look, it's hard everywhere, and you can't please everyone. I think is the thing, but governments do their best to try.
They do.
And so I think that they get in their own way sometimes.
Yeah.
How can builders and tradies better engage with government, do you think?
I don't know, mate. That's a really good question, because ultimately government doesn't really want you to engage. So I think it just depends on the level of frustration that you've got. And I think that the way that you engaged with the machine earlier on in the year was great. There's only so many times you can pull that trigger. You can't do that all the time. I think you've just got to open as many lines of communication as you can, and ultimately use, if you're having genuine long-term drama, which is potentially going to challenge your business model, engage with non-government MLAs and get them to take it to government, and just continue talking honestly with people.
Yeah, that's a great point. Talking honestly, and I guess giving your feedback on how you're going and what's holding you up. We spoke about a little bit earlier on about running an electoral office is a bit like running a business, more similar than most people think. Like, talk to me about your day to day. What does it look like?
Yeah, it's different. There's a lot of engagement. I, as we mentioned at the start of the podcast, worked on radio for 33 years, and I did a long stint doing some FM breakfast programs, including Mix 106.3, Canberra's best music mix, as it was then.
Perfect.
And
still got it.
What I found is that there are so many similarities to being an elected member to being an FM breakfast host, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to convince thousands of people that you live next door to them, and that you watch the same TV shows they watch, you do the same stuff they do, you understand their lives. And that's what you're trying to do on an FM breakfast program, and that's what we're trying to do. Now, I would like to believe that there's truth in what we say, in that I do live in Tuggeranong with my wife and two Kelpies, and the life that we lead is very similar to the lives that many of my constituents lead. But you've just got to keep on communicating. You've got to keep on turning up. You've got to, we have this thing in my office that if someone sends you an email, we are responding to that on the day that we get it. And if it's possible for us to actually get together face to face and talk through an issue, that's what we will do. And so, yeah, I just think it's about continually reaching out, continually exceeding expectations. You gotta front up, you gotta turn up, and you gotta do the best job that you can do so that people notice what you're doing. Because as narcissistic as it sounds, if no one notices that you're doing it, well, then you won't be reelected. So it sounds very ego driven, but it kind of has to be, because if people can't see what you're doing, they just won't vote for you.
That's a very good point. And what I wanted to say back to that is, you display a lot of leadership, and I like talking about leadership. And I feel that there's some other MLAs maybe that need to take a page out of your book and look at how you're operating, because I can see that you want to really serve the community, and you want to listen to people, and you want to solve problems. And I commend you for that, Mark. And thanks for all the hard work that you've been doing.
can I defend some of those other MLAs on all sides of the political spectrum? Because often it just gets down to they're doing a great job, but they just don't communicate it as well as me. That's part of the problem.
And that's what I'm talking about with leadership, though. You're leading from the front. You're letting the average Canberran see what you do every day.
Yeah.
And that would be great for people to understand, hey, these guys are real people and they, live in the suburbs we live in. They run around the lake every day like you do. They operate in Canberra, So I think sometimes people look at the MLAs and they think you're living in a mansion in Forest maybe or something along those lines and you're not in the community as much. But I would say that the way that you're communicating what you're doing, and look, social media is a beast in terms of people are so quick to tell you you're doing the wrong thing.
Oh yeah.
And I love your you like to go back at these.
I do. Sometimes I shouldn't. I mean, the most rabid platform for comments is TikTok. It's crazy. But I'll bounce back and serve it back up to people.
But that's engagement, and that's what it should be.
Yeah.
You have to communicate what you're doing, and you have to be telling these people, hey, well, actually, you're wrong. You went to, where was it? Was it Wollongong to look at the graffiti?
Yeah.
And I look at that and I go, cool. He's going out and doing research for Canberra and getting information firsthand.
And it's interesting, the graffiti one was interesting because the report that I handed down was not a public report. We made the call towards the back end of the process that it just wouldn't be helpful for government to have all of the recommendations public because the war against graffiti is a war, all right? And if you tell the enemy what it is that you're going to do, well, then they'll pivot and find a way to get around that. So he made the call at the back end that it wasn't a public report. It was a 7,000-word report. At the start of the process, there was a bunch of graffiti writers who, like 8 or 9 of them, who would come on my Instagram and, no, I can't say that, and would just bag the shit out of me and say, shut up, you silly old boomer, you'll never understand this. And I would write back to them and engage with them and say, hey, look, I'm just trying to find out this. And after a while, we actually entered in some sensible engagement. And then we took it offline, not in a public space, into direct message. And I got so much information, which I think was generally helpful in putting the report together. But you've got to engage with people to get that. You've got to actually, and sometimes it means taking a smack in the mouth. But it is what it is.
You run the risk. But a good outcome nonetheless.
And I think it's just about not, don't take it personally. It's like, I don't know, like I played AFL badly for a number of years, and you just arrive at the conclusion that this big bloke that you're playing on, yeah, sure, he smacked me across the mouth there, but it was only because we're playing a game of footy. Like at the end of it, we'll have a beer.
Yeah, that's right.
It's all right.
It's what happens on the field stays on the field.
Yeah.
Now, Mark, you're a busy man.
Yeah.
How do you stay grounded and how do you avoid burnout?
It's that's a pretty good question. I mean, I don't know. We lead a pretty simple life at home. I do all the food at home, which works for me. It's sort of I don't mind having sometimes I'll have days where I started at 7 in the morning and I get home at 7 at night, but then I'll get in the kitchen and make dinner for everyone. That's fine. I run a bit. I'm learning to play the drums. I watch a bit of footy, and yeah,
they're your decompression mechanisms.
Yeah.
Keeps you going, keeps you sane.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Love that. Fantastic. Why do you think trades aren't getting the respect they deserve?
It's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because in some places they genuinely do get the respect they deserve, and I think because of the national narrative on construction in regards to the housing crisis, I think that there has been a shift in the way that trades are perceived. But I think that shift has to continue. And, to some extent it's about, you guys need more foot soldiers. And so unless you are placed higher up the ladder in terms of how people consider apprentices, trades, and people who are building shit, you're not going to continue to get as many people doing it. And it's needed. It's absolutely needed.
Definitely. We've got to attract more young people. That's one point that I bring up every time in the podcast about how to attract younger people. I think it starts with schools, and it starts with the community thinking that, tradies and going into a trade is a career. Being a builder is a career. And I think that's important to, I guess, change the narrative, if you want to speak. I think we need to get into more schools and tell people about, trades and glamorize it a bit more, maybe.
Make it fun.
Make it fun.
And just get people fired up and inspired and interested.
What would your advice be to a young person thinking about picking up the tools?
I don't know that I'm the right one to give advice on it, mate.
All right, well, let's say going into politics then. Whatever you want to say.
I think I'm an old man, all right? I'm 58 years old. One of the great blessings that I've had in my life is I don't think I've ever worked in a job that I didn't enjoy. I've never felt as though I was going to work, ever. And so my advice would be to people, find something that you really like doing, and that's how you should earn your living. Because I really feel for these poor bastards that clock onto work every day and fucking hate it. It's like, really? Every day you're gonna do that for 8 hours and you don't want to, why don't you do something else? So obviously decisions are made early on, that potentially set up the rest of your life. And I know that puts pressure on people because so many people who are 16, 18, 20, or even 25 don't even really know what they want to do for the rest of their lives. Find the shit that you like doing and do that.
Yeah. Try as many different things as you can.
Yeah.
Find it, stick with it, give it a real crack.
Yeah.
And enjoy what you're doing. Because if you don't work what's the saying about not enjoy your job and you don't work a day in your life?
That's right. And sometimes that means embracing it once you're there, I get sick to death of people who just front up to work because they need the money.
Yeah. I agree. What's working well for you, Mark, and what keeps you up at night?
Not much keeps me up at night.
You're very cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah, I am.
What's working well for you?
Look, I don't know. I'm really enjoying being the Speaker of the Parliament. It's a great privilege. And
you're doing a good job of it as well.
I hope so. But it's sort of bizarre because there's not very often that you have a member of the opposition party who ends up as the Speaker. It doesn't often happen. Now, they were forced to some extent by numbers, the Labor Party. They only had 10 members and there's eight ministers. And so, but it was really cool that all the parties were able to come to an agreement that I was the one who was to do it. And it's a pretty cool gig.
I think you were the man for the job. That's what I think.
It takes me out of action in a number of other areas.
It does. There is that tactical element to it, isn't it? The battleground at the Legislative Assembly.
Yeah, but it is what it is.
All right, we'll move on to the quick fire round. One tool you can't live without.
Coffee grinder.
Coffee grinder.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You need the fuel. You need the fuel.
Yeah, and I got two of them because I got one at work and one in the office. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do you have your coffee? Flat white, long black?
Oh, just a latte. Like I'll
latte?
put the milk in there and yeah, a couple of sugars and away you go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What's the biggest myth about politicians, Mark?
That we're lazy bastards. I think that's the biggest myth because that's people just think that we sit at home watching Netflix and it's just
the media loves to give you a bad rap.
They do. I'm sure there's some members, not that I can think of any, but yeah, it's hard yards.
One thing you'd fix in the construction industry tomorrow?
I don't know. That's a tough question, particularly because I'm not the portfolio holder, and so I don't want to be making a statement on behalf of the Liberals.
That's Peter Kane, isn't it? I've got to get him in here for a chat.
Yeah, look, I reckon the changes that have been announced by Steele, I know you're looking for short answers. Many of them look relatively positive, but the LVC is still a killer, mate. Still a killer. And it's going to take so many of these potential expansions of housing on RZ1 and whatever off the table, because when you do the maths on it, it's just not quite going to cut the mustard.
And they don't want to budge on it either.
No. So if it's not worth doing, if people aren't going to make money out of it, they're not going to do it.
I call those type of solutions a vanilla ice cream solution, in that everyone eats vanilla ice cream, but I'd rather chocolate.
Well, you would. But see, the other thing is, mate, if you adjusted those LVC settings, even if you adjusted them rather dramatically, the theory is that because so many more dwellings would be built, you'd make as much, if not more, money out of it.
And they want to build 30,000 homes. Yeah. Anyway, look, the quick fire round is never quick fire. But tell me about the best advice you've ever received, Mark.
Yeah, look, again, and we touched on it earlier, there was a guy who taught me most of the things I know about radio. I produced his program in Adelaide when I was 19 and 20, and he contracted lung cancer when we were doing his program. And he continued doing the program pretty much up until the time that he died. And he gave me so much wisdom about, I'm sorry, I know it's supposed to be the quickfire round, but like I can remember this day when he was doing chemo. He was as sick as a dog. And we'd done this morning program, and it took him 20 minutes to walk from the studio to the office. He shouldn't have been at work. And he sat down in his chair, and he said to me, he said, Mark, all these people, they walk past me and they smile at me, but they think that I'm dying and they feel sorry for me. And he said, I'm actually the luckiest man in the building. And I said, how do you figure that, Vin? How do you figure you're the luckiest man in the building? He said, I'm the only one here who knows what every day of my life is worth. And he said, no one else has got a single clue. And I thought, wow. And those words echo for me every single day. So that was the best advice that I received in regards, you are here for this short period of time, make a splash every single day.
Can I say that it shows in all of your actions and how hard you're working? It does show. You really have a crack. You know, getting a meeting with you is difficult. Catching up for a podcast was difficult, but I appreciate your time and I appreciate all the stuff you're doing.
Good.
Advice you'd give to your younger self, Mark?
Similar. Yeah, I just say the same.
Live every day.
Not here for long.
Yeah.
So
have a crack.
Have a go, and like if you don't know the answer, ask the question. Like, don't die wondering. Like, just and that applies to just about all aspects of life.
Yep.
Like, to my 17-year-old self, if you don't know whether she'll go out with you, well, just ask her. Like, what is the worst possible thing that could happen? Just get on the front foot and say, hey, I got a plan. How about we do this? Bang. She doesn't want to do it, whatever. Go to the next one.
Yeah. Who are you calling out to come on the podcast and have a chat with me, Mark?
The Chief Minister.
The Chief Minister?
And the Opposition Leader.
And the Opposition Leader,
yeah.
Okay.
Not at the same time.
No. Please, just one at a time. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, no. Andrew and Leanne, where are you?
Come and have a chat. I'm nice. Where can people find you, Mark? If they love the sound of your voice, they want to know more about Mark Parton, where can we find you?
We're all over the socials, mate. Just look for me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and I'll be there.
Comment on your posts and say hello.
That's the go.
Mate, what's your favourite quote or what's the mantra to you?
Just keep on going hard. Just keep on going hard. Give it your best every day, and let's have a beer at the end of it.
Mark, thanks for pulling the curtain back. You're one of the few who actually shows up, doesn't dodge the hard stuff, and brings some honesty into a space that badly needs it. Appreciate your time, mate. All the best. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.